Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel, a channel where I am finally using my new setup. It is time for a review of the new surprise collaborative album between producer The Alchemist and rapper Freddie Gibbs, cleverly titled Alfredo. Freddie Gibbs is someone with a lot of reputation to his name, much of which stemming from his collaborative projects with producer Madlib. Rightfully so, as both of those projects, Bandana and Pinata, are great projects. I, as well as many others, were very curious to see if, no pun intended, he had as much chemistry on this album with The Alchemist. On this project, Freddie takes an approach that is somewhat similar to what he's always done and is not atypical for his lane of hip-hop. Similar themes come up time and time again, as lyrically this album is about a hard life of crime, violence, and especially selling hard drugs, as Freddie employs what is essentially a alter ego with Freddie Kane once again on this album. As you may come to expect, a lot of this talk in the album is somewhat of a cautionary tale, as Freddie kind of talks about being glad that he got out of that lifestyle alive, while still somewhat glamorizing in a movie-esque fashion certain aspects of that lifestyle. Really, you could toss the more of the same criticism at Freddie, but even if you do, who's really complaining at this point? Because while the cold-blooded crack-dealing lyrics are back on this album, so is the talented lyricism and wordplay that has always come to play on Freddie's projects that make for a stellar set of bars on every appearance. And it's all delivered under a set of flows that have clearly been honed under a perfectionistic lens as Freddie tears through many of these beats, always using a catchy and clever flow to hook the listener in. You oftentimes end up backing the track up just a little bit to make sure that you properly picked up on the reference or metaphor that he served up. Many deep-rooted and very clever metaphors are used on here, and that's kind of the moments in which he would do that. That's not to say that he's completely one note here either, as there are some really great introspective moments. One of the best is Skinny Suge, where he talks about not really being able to trust anyone and kind of having trust issues with everyone that he should be able to rely on. There's also the first verse of Scotty Beam, which is especially relevant right now, and its importance is very clear, as this was likely written before the tragic events of last week. You could also look at all the times that Freddie talks about family and his religion, which there are quite a few of, so clearly, lyrically, there is more than meets the eye. Another great lyrical moment is the track with Tyler, the Creator, Something to Rap About, where Freddie talks about his really rough background, but uses it as a positive, as now it gives him something to rap about. Tyler only adds to the introspection here as he talks about his past on this track and how he got into the place that he currently is in. He is also importing a really nice set of imagery talking about jumping off the boat that he hasn't bought yet and how the beat sounds like the boat he hasn't bought yet. As far as other features on this album go, it is certainly not bloated, which is very tasteful, as there are only 3 other features here, 2 of which coming from members of the Griselda collective. Benny the Butcher and Conway the Machine, as you would expect, have great chemistry with Freddie Gibbs on this project, as all 3 kind of have the same trademark thing, rapping about selling crack. The obvious chemistry is very present on the midway point of this album featuring Benny the Butcher, called Frank Lucas, where both rappers are essentially comparing themselves to the drug kingpin of the same name. The Conway verse scene later on this album, though, is actually a little bit more interesting than you'd expect, because he gets a little bit more introspective for his half of the song, and it's pretty compelling and emotionally impactful, which was somewhat unexpected, I guess. As far as the Rick Ross verse on the second half of Scotty Beam, it is there. It exists. It is a rap verse. It is from Rick Ross. And now you know everything I have to say about it. Freddie Gibbs easily could have bodied this 35 minutes, but with 4 other people coming along that can hold their own, especially backed with a beat like these, and having as large of contributions they do, as most of the features here actually dominate the second half of the songs that they're on, this is such a stacked track list. An even more stacked track list than it was to begin with just the Alchemist and Freddie Gibbs. But the Alchemist production on this album is really what gives it a special charm that makes it stand out from the rest of Gibbs' discography. This album has much of its focus on the ever-consistent set of sounds that seamlessly transition from one into the next, all sounding like they're coming out of a radio from the 80s in somebody's dusty garage. You could go as far as to call the production choices on here lo-fi, but I think that that's dumbing it down a little bit too much. This is much more vintage, I would call it, than lo-fi, as while I guess technically it is of a lower fidelity than music that is produced now when there's samples happening that are very recurring through the beat itself. This is of course mixed with a very high standard and produced in a way that makes it sound modern and old at the same time. On the tracks 1985, Something to Rap About, Skinny Shug, the Alchemist uses guitars in here in a very unique way that is something that I've been seeing a little bit more of recently, but is done really well here. But if you really want an indication of the aesthetic aura of this album, look no further than the ominous keys on the second track. God is perfect, because these perfectly represent what you're in for. More oftentimes than not, it's hard to exactly pinpoint what makes these sounds so vintage, old, and dusty, as they really do, but it's never hard to be impressed by it when you get completely ripped out of that aesthetic into an entirely different one for a brief few seconds. By this I mean the transcending atmospheric beat switch transition between verses, I guess, on the track Something to Rap About, and the bass heavy explosion that closes out the album on the track All Glass, accompanied by a Breaking Bad sample that could not have been placed any better in my opinion, and could not have closed the album out any better. While that is my favorite one here, probably because I'm a huge fan of the show, that is one of many vocal samples that are just snippets of talking, and these spoken word passages are something that makes the album flow seamlessly into itself. Oftentimes a track will cut in the middle of a monologue or a conversation that you're hearing, making it legitimately impossible to tell where the track starts and ends unless you're looking at the actual runtime on the track listing itself. These transitions make me alleviated of the concern that this might feel a little bit inconsistent altogether, and it's really the last push that I need to consider this to be free-flowing as an entire project, all put together and works really well and seamlessly. If this record is Alfredo, I sure as hell am eating it up, because I'm feeling about an 8 out of 10 on this one. So let me know what you thought of this album down in the comment section below. I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions. Drop a like on the video if you did like what you saw today, and subscribe to the channel for more music related content coming your way very soon. But that is just about going to wrap it up for this one, and I will see you in the next video.